Hoping to give their children a better life, a couple followed a realtor to a detached house. The house was beautifully furnished, with even a boathouse out back, and the price was unbelievably low. The deal seemed too good to pass up, and they were thrilled, completely unaware of a shadow slipping past in the distance. Just as they were ready to make the purchase, George couldn't shake his unease about the unusually low price. He quickly asked the realtor if there was something they weren't being told, and with no way to hide it, the realtor finally came clean. A year ago, a horrific murder had taken place there. Late one night, the homeowner brutally shot his entire family, then ran into a nearby bar in a panic, begging for help. Strangely, after hours of interrogation, he confessed to the crime. But in court, he claimed a voice had compelled him to kill his family. Because of the incident, the house sat on the market, its price dropping lower and lower. The story unsettled Kathy, but George dismissed any talk of the supernatural and bought the house anyway. The next day, they moved in with their children, who eagerly explored every corner of their new home. While unpacking in the hallway, Kathy suddenly heard her daughter Annie talking to someone else. She rushed into the room, but Annie was sitting there alone. When Kathy asked who she was talking to, Annie said it was a girl named Jody from the closet. Kathy assumed Jody was just an imaginary friend, until a strange girl suddenly appeared on a nearby chair. The girl gestured for Annie to stay quiet, and Annie mimicked the gesture. Kathy followed her gaze, but the chair was empty. That night, after unpacking, George and Kathy found themselves getting intimate in their bedroom. Just as they were lost in the moment, George suddenly noticed a little girl standing nearby. She stood at the foot of the bed, staring at them, instantly freezing him in place. Sensing something was wrong, Kathy turned to look but saw nothing. Thinking he was just exhausted, she comforted him and urged him to get some rest. The next day, something even stranger happened. While they were preparing lunch, their dog suddenly started barking wildly outside. Following the noise, they made their way to the boathouse by the lake, where the dog was barking frantically. Annie stood on the boat holding a balloon, staring blankly ahead, unresponsive to their calls. Only when they called out louder did she snap out of it and run straight into George's arms. Worried, Kathy asked why she was there, but Annie said Jody wanted to see the boat. Realizing something was off, Kathy took Annie back to the house, while George stayed behind to lock up the boathouse. That night, as Mike got up to use the bathroom, he suddenly heard a strange noise coming from the vents. Fighting back his fear, he cautiously stepped out, and as he passed the window, he noticed the boathouse door shaking violently. Terrified, he bolted to the bathroom, only relaxing slightly once he was back in the light. But when he tried to wash his hands, nothing came out of the faucet. Another noise echoed outside. He slowly turned around, only for a figure to suddenly appear right beside him. Blood began dripping from the faucet, and Mike ran back to his room, diving under the covers in panic. At the same time, the furniture in the living room began moving on its own, and the windows flew open, rattling violently. A sudden gunshot jolted George awake, and he carefully approached the window to check outside. To his shock, a balloon drifted out of the boathouse, followed by another burst of frantic barking. Thinking Annie might have snuck in again, he rushed straight toward the boathouse. But when he got inside, it was empty. The dog was barking wildly at the lake. Seeing bubbles rising from the surface, George dove in to search, but found no one. He climbed back onto shore, trying to calm the dog while desperately searching for Annie. Then he saw the girl standing outside Annie's window, only for her to suddenly appear right behind it, staring straight at him. Panicked, George rushed back. But when he opened the door, Annie was fast asleep in bed. Relieved, he stepped into the closet. But the moment he switched on the light, Jody was pinned to the ceiling by unseen hands. Yet George noticed nothing. He simply picked up a teddy bear and placed it beside his daughter's pillow. The next day, as Kathy cleaned the kitchen, a shadow flickered behind her, and the letter blocks on the fridge began to move on their own. They eventually spelled out "catch them and kill them," but Kathy brushed it off as her son playing a prank. She called out for Billy, but there was no response. He was nowhere to be found. Just then, George walked in for a drink, and when Kathy tried to mention the blocks, they were already back to normal. With all the strange events weighing on them, they decided to go out for a date to clear their minds. Worried about leaving the kids alone, they hired a babysitter. As they showed her around, she mentioned she had once worked in this house before. Seeing how confident she was, they didn't think much of it and left. Later, the babysitter chatted with Billy, who curiously asked about the house's previous owner. With a mischievous tone, she began telling him about the murder that had taken place there. At first, the homeowner believed the family dog was somehow targeting him, so he brutally killed it. A few days later, the strange voices returned, convincing him that his own family were demons and he killed his children with his own hands. The horrifying story left Billy completely shaken. George and Kathy had never told their children about any of this. The babysitter then led Billy and Mike to Annie's room, telling them that a girl named Jody had died there. She claimed Jody's body had once been hidden in the storage room, but before she could go on, Annie suddenly said Jody hated the babysitter. The babysitter brushed it off, saying it was Jody who got her fired in the first place. Amused by her attitude, Billy dared her to stay in the storage room for a while, and without hesitation, she walked right in. The moment she stepped inside, the door slammed shut. She assumed it was just another prank from Billy. But then the lights began flickering wildly, and Billy insisted it wasn't him while trying to force the door open. Panic set in as she tried to leave, but Jody suddenly appeared right behind her, calling out her name. She showed the wounds on her body, then grabbed the babysitter's hand and forced it into them. Gunshots echoed as the lights flickered, and scenes from the past murders began playing out across the walls and floor. Terrified, the babysitter screamed and pounded on the door, desperately trying to get out. It wasn't until George and Kathy returned that they found her and rushed the now hysterical babysitter into an ambulance. George blamed everything on Billy, convinced the boy was targeting him on purpose because he refused to accept him as his stepfather. The next morning, he punished Billy by forcing him to haul firewood all day, not letting him stop until late at night. With the windows mysteriously opening on their own every night, George decided to nail them all shut. That's when he started hearing whispers, urging him to kill everyone. Drawn by the voice, George approached a wall, and the moment he touched it, he found himself inside a prison cell. At the center, a platform overflowed with blood, and a mutilated body lay on top of it. As George turned the body over, he froze. The face looked exactly like his. The gruesome sight made him vomit uncontrollably, and he rushed to the bathroom to wash himself off. But the moment he sank into the tub, a pair of pale hands suddenly pulled him under. No matter how hard he struggled, he couldn't break free, until Kathy rushed in and pulled him out just in time. With George constantly seeing things, Kathy decided to take him to the hospital. The doctor found nothing physically wrong, suggesting it was likely psychological. Kathy was convinced the house was the problem, and kept urging George to leave, but they had already spent all their savings on the house. There was no way George would walk away, and things only got worse when they returned home. Annie's teddy bear suddenly dropped from above. Then Annie's voice suddenly called out from above, and they looked up to see her standing alone at the edge of the roof. Panicked, Kathy rushed inside and ran upstairs toward the roof, while George quickly set up a ladder to climb up from outside. Before they could reach her, Annie began walking along the edge of the roof toward the other side. Without hesitation, Kathy climbed out the window and carefully inched toward Annie, trying to calm her down. But Annie had already reached the edge. Just as she was about to fall, Kathy lunged forward and grabbed her. Due to the imbalance in their weight, the two of them slid down the eaves. At the last possible moment, George reached out and caught Anne. Once they were safe, Kathy broke down, scolding Annie, but Annie blankly said Jody had told her to do it. She believed that if she did what Jody told her and jumped, she would finally see her father again. Those words shattered Kathy. She knew something was terribly wrong with the house. As the strange events escalated, George's nerves finally snapped, and he ended up moving into the basement alone. Determined to end it, Kathy sought help from a priest. She told him everything that had been happening, and gave him the address of the house. The moment he heard the address, his expression darkened, and they agreed to carry out an exorcism the next day. Meanwhile, George took out his anger on Billy, forcing him to hold a log while he raised an axe and brought it down hard. His behavior grew more erratic, as if he might snap at any moment. That night, he sat on the couch watching old home videos, trying to steady himself. But suddenly the footage began to distort, Billy's face twisting into something monstrous. He thought it was just his imagination. But as he tried to rest, the whispers returned, urging him to kill everyone. Suddenly the doors and windows flew open, and the dog's frantic barking echoed outside again. Unable to hold back any longer, George grabbed an axe and followed the sound outside. But the moment he entered the boathouse, everything fell silent. Then a creature lunged at him. He swung the axe in panic, not stopping until the figure stopped moving. When he looked again, he realized it was Billy's dog. His sanity began to slip even further. The next day, the priest arrived at the villa as scheduled. But when he saw the teddy bear in Anne's arms, his expression grew even more somber. He quickly pulled Kathy aside and told her that was Jody's toy, one he had personally placed in her coffin. Realizing how serious things were, Kathy urged him to come inside and begin the ritual immediately. But the moment the ritual began, something felt off. The doors slammed shut, and strange noises echoed through the vents. Before the priest could react, a swarm of flies swarmed toward him, and an eerie voice ordered him to get out of the villa. Terrified, the priest scrambled into the car, and ignoring Casey's pleas to stay, drove straight away. That night, the whisper returned, luring George once again. He broke down and ran outside, trying to escape it. Then the barking echoed from the boathouse again. Even though the dog had died the night before, the relentless voices tormented him until he collapsed to his knees, screaming in agony. Seeing him like this, Kathy knew she had to do something to end it. The next day, she went to the town archives to dig into the house's past, She discovered the house had once been a church, where a warlock had slaughtered a group of Native Americans in the basement. In the end, he used dark magic to take his own life, binding his spirit to the house forever. The previous owner had also moved into the basement, and on the 28th day, he shot and killed his entire family. Kathy's heart sank, because today marked their 28th day in the house. Without wasting a second, she rushed back home, hoping to stop George. But under the entity's influence, George had already smashed through the basement wall and witnessed something horrific. The moment the warlock's blood touched him, George lost all sanity, his eyes filling with madness. When Kathy returned, she found coffins laid out for every member of the family. The sight shattered her, and at that moment George stumbled in, completely unhinged. Realizing he was beyond saving, she grabbed Annie and ran for her life. In a panic, she called for Billy and Michael to block the basement door, then sprinted for the exit. But something was wrong. Every door they passed slammed shut, the nails twisting themselves tighter. Every escape was sealed. They could only run through the house, desperately searching for a way out. Soon, George blocked their path and slammed Kathy against the wall, ready to finish her off. At the last second, a flicker of clarity returned. He let go, asking what was happening in confusion. Kathy seized the moment and ran with the kids. But as George followed, the madness took over once more and he grabbed a shotgun. By the time he reached the room, Kathy and the kids had already climbed onto the roof. Hearing movement above, he didn't hesitate. He raised the shotgun and fired. The blast tore through the roof right beside her, shaking. Kathy kept climbing as fast as she could. At that moment, Billy turned back and ripped off a metal pipe from the structure. As George climbed up onto the roof, Billy swung the pipe, knocking him unconscious. George immediately tumbled down the roof and landed in a mud puddle nearby. But just as the four of them were climbing down from the roof, he opened his eyes again. He picked up the axe lying nearby and completely blocked the four of them. Then he grabbed BU and pinned him down with the wooden stick. For a moment he stared at Billy in confusion, but then Billy's face twisted into something monstrous. Terrified, George raised the axe to strike. But at the last second, Kathy grabbed the shotgun and struck him, knocking him unconscious. In that instant, flashes of happier times filled his mind, and he realized that if he didn't die, the entity would make him kill his family.
Kathy, kill me! You kill me or I'll kill you!
Nobody's dying today.
After knocking him out, Kathy and the others tied him up tightly and dragged him to the boathouse. They struggled to get George onto the boat, and the family left the dreadful villa in their speedboat. As the sun slowly rose, George finally regained his senses, breaking free from the entity's grip. The curse lingered in every corner of that house. Greed and denial may lead people into darkness, but love remains the strongest salvation. And the horror of that house never truly ends. It still stands there, waiting for its next victim.